all out for America's 250th, dropping $250,000 in cash. Beginning Monday, you could win your share with $2,500. Listen for the keyword, enter it at KFAN.com starting at 8 a.m. and plan your ultimate U.S. adventure.
With $250,000, you can afford to buy a video game console now, Brett. I mean, it takes almost that kind of money at this stage, but that $250,000 will go a long way. Joining me now from The Athletic, Michael Russo. Hi, my friend. You and I have not had a chance to talk in quite a while. It's probably been a year, which is not cool.
Yeah, ever since you left.
We need to. Well, yeah, I guess there's that, right? I did leave, so it's on me. I admit that. So, okay, I'll take that L. That's on me. But I miss you, and I'm glad to have you back. So
thanks,
I moved to Southern Utah.
For having me.
Yeah, I moved to Southern Utah, and that's gorgeous. Weather's phenomenal. It's beautiful everywhere you look. It's just, it's terrific out here. I love it. But I miss my friends, and I miss the station, and I miss you. But I opened up my hockey allegiances, which were uniformly Wild related up until now. I'm like, you know what? I can have two teams that I like. So I've now become a Vegas Knights fan and a Wild fan. I'm considering picking up the Mammoth because they're good and they're young and they're going to be good. But I've been tracking Las Vegas really closely. Some of the people that I think you know from the Vikings now work for the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and I was excited for their success. These poor people laboring in the front office of the Vikings for decades, in some cases, no championships, and now they go to Las Vegas, and a year later they're in the Stanley Cup. So let me start here. Give me some historic context, Michael, for this upset sweep. Not just the upset, but the fact that it was a sweep and the fashion that it was against the team that it came against. Give me some historic context here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the most, I would say improbable sweeps that I can remember. I mean, obviously, John Tortorella coached the Columbus Blue Jackets that swept the Tampa Bay Lightning, who also won the President's Trophy. A number of years back. The other one I can remember is the 95 Devils. I mean, I don't think a lot of people thought that they were going to run through the Detroit. I didn't think a lot of people thought that they were going to run through anybody, but they beat Boston Bruins in 5 games in the Eastern Final, actually 31 years ago today. And then they wound up just, annihilating, the Detroit Red Wings in the final. It was a lockout shortened season. Bill Guerin was actually on that team. And I don't think a lot of people remember that. But this to me, because the Colorado Avalanche, as we were prone to say during the second round, they seem to be a wagon. And, they, from start to finish, they started the season absolutely on fire, historical, number of wins to start the year. And then they went into cruise control. They really didn't have to deal with too much adversity during the year. They didn't have a ton of injuries. And then all of a sudden against the Wild, they started to get banged up. Lehkonen got hurt. Makar clearly got hurt in game one, lower body injury on a Marcus Foligno hit. But then if you remember down the stretch of the season, Makar, who I still think is, one of the top two best defensemen in the world, he hurt his shoulder, and it definitely seemed to get aggravated when he ran into Zuccarello in game 5. And to me, that was the biggest, shame of blowing that 3-0 lead for the Wild, is that clearly Makar was not going to be able to play games 6 and 7 because he missed 1 and 2 of this series, and clearly was hurt in 3 and 4.
And now, maybe that would have been enough of a difference, or at least it would have helped even out the injury differential between the Wild and the Avs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I still remember 2014 when Matt Cook took out Tyson Berry's knee. That completely changed the complexion of that Colorado-Minnesota series, and the Wild wound up storming back in that series and winning, 2 of the last 3 games, and including Game 7 there. And it kind of reminded me of the same thing. Now, Tyson Berry, obviously a very different defenseman than Kel Makar, although at that point, Tyson Berry was the top defenseman for the Avalanche in my eyes. Certainly their best power play defenseman, was an absolute offensive dynamo for them at that point in his career. And this was sort of the same thing. Now, I think McCarr was banged up for a lot of that Wild series, but clearly he wasn't going to be able to play the last two games. And that's one of those things that you'll always have to wonder if the Wild really, we all knew that they dropped the ball dramatically in that game and didn't give themselves a chance to come back in that series the way they played in game 4 and 5, but especially to blow a 3-0 lead and to have a 3-1 lead with 3.5 minutes left in that game. And now knowing what we know now, that McCarr was severely hurt, and I think has a major surgery coming up as well. I think that we're all going to always wonder what could have been.
Michael, what do you think about the notion that some Wild fans are perpetrating that Minnesota beat up the Avalanche and created a primrose path for Vegas to get the sweep they got?
Well, I think that's not giving Vegas enough credit. I mean, John Tortorella and his structure there has done a tremendous job. And in fact, the way that the Vegas Golden Knights played in that series was in a lot of ways the way the Wild played in game 3 of the second round. And what the Golden Knights did that the Wild couldn't do was just do it more consistently on an every game basis and got better and better as the series went along, even in game 4. Where I thought they played their best game of the series. So I think that's too easy of a cop-out. There's no doubt that the way that, this is what we were saying before the playoffs, that whoever was in the Pacific had an easier road to the Stanley Cup final than anybody in the Central. And this is the idiotic playoff format that the league has. And hopefully this is going to be not just what happened in this series, but what's happened in the East. This has been one of the least competitive Stanley Cup playoffs that I can remember. And the other common denominator, the last 5 or 6 years, is that these Eastern and Western Conference finals have been 4 or 5 games in every single series except for one. And that is not the way the playoffs should work. It just feels like inferior teams have the ability to go further. So I think that the Minnesota Wild beat up the Dallas Stars. I think the Dallas Stars obviously beat up the Wild. And I think that the Wild went into this series and it just always felt like it was going to be that way, that when you have 3 of the top teams in going up against each other in the first 2 rounds, that just the rigor and the energy that it takes to get through the first couple rounds is going to beat each other up. And it would just leave an open path for the team in the Pacific. And, I don't think that any of us thought that the Colorado Avalanche would get swept. And obviously I picked the Avalanche to beat the Vegas Golden Knights, but I do think this playoff format is reared its ugly head this postseason. I'm not making excuses for the Wild, the Avalanche, or the Dallas Stars, but I just think that you have these 3 great teams that beat the heck out of each other. And the Wild obviously went into the Colorado series without 2 of their best defensive players in Eriksson and Brodin. They got hurt in different ways. It wasn't that the Dallas Stars beat them up. One broke his essentially an ankle, just falling down. The other blocked a shot. But still, I think that when it came down to it, I think injuries affected the Avalanche, injuries affected the Stars, and injuries affected the Wild. And that's why all of them bowed out.
The reason for hope that the NHL will change the way they seed the playoffs is what you said. 4 and 5 game series don't make as much money for the owners as 6 and 7 game series do. Every one of those playoff games are a massive cash cow for the teams, and they want those extra playoff games. So, when you talk pocketbook, that's when change happens. I could tell you that Craig Leopold right now wants this change. I can tell you that every owner in the league wants a change, but Gary Bettman, who, by the way, is employed by the owners, is the one that rules the roost here. He's literally the only person that I know in the NHL executive front office that likes this format. He is the one that's running this. I don't think his number 2. I think his number 2, if he was the number 1, he'd change it. I think everybody in NHL headquarters would change it. It's just him. And, I think it's idiotic. Now, again, I don't want to take away from what the Vegas Golden Knights are doing. They are peaking at the perfect time. They've gotten great goaltending. Tortorella's done wonders there. They are loaded up and down the lineup. They got healthy at the right time too. They got all their guys back. Obviously, Karlsson, Stone missed the first couple games of the series, but he was just mammoth in game 4.
So I don't want to take away from what they're doing. But, you look at the Eastern Conference Final right now, it's an absolute joke. I mean, the Montreal Canadiens are just getting demolished by the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yep.
And it's been this way the entire postseason, by the way. Like, there was one game that the Montreal Canadiens against the Tampa Bay Lightning had 9 shots on goal and wound up winning. I've never seen a team run through the playoffs the way the Canadiens have been outplayed more than them, yet they somehow seem to either be on the winning side or wind up getting these games to overtime. And even games 2 and 3 of this series, 2 and 3 of this series in the Eastern Conference Final, they wound up forcing overtime in games they had no right to be in. And so, to me, it's just, this has not been a competitive playoff. And some of us, cocky, pompous NHL fans used to make fun of the NBA for that. That every game was a sweep and that, you knew at the beginning of the season who would win the cup. And now the last several years, I mean, I covered a couple of Eastern Conference Finals the last 3 years. I ended sweeps, in favor of Florida. And it's just, I don't think or 5 games. And, I just don't think it's good for the league.
That's the familiar voice of Michael Russo from The Athletic. Doesn't Bettman still answer to the owners? I mean, if you're telling me that there's 30 owners who want to make the change, I mean, Bettman at the end of the day answers to the owners, right? I mean, just because he likes it one way,
so. I mean, the funny thing, Church, is about all commissioners of pro sports is they're employed by the owners, but they are the boss. It's one of the most fascinating dynamics that I've ever seen. In any industry is you're giving these guys $20, $30, $40 million to run the business. They're hired by the owners, but yet they sit there and they have, all the power in the world. They find teams, find owners. It's a really fascinating dynamic. But this is Gary's playoff system. Just even as recent as the March, 2 months ago, the March, GM's meetings in a press conference, and the GM's meetings, he and I got into a debate over this during a line of questioning, and he basically said the dirty little secret out loud is that in which I think is a problem for the NHL is that more eyes are on the early series of these series, so they're getting tons of ratings, and they make huge gates there. My comeback to him would be, I think the reason is that hockey fans in general are very provincial. Even Wild fans, as much as this is the state of hockey, when the Wild bow out, a lot of people stop paying attention. And it's that way in every single market. Sure. It's been a huge problem for the NHL for years. So they feel if they have these rivalries in the early rounds, it's going to get monster ratings and create long series, which is also what he said, which means huge gates and things like that. The comeback that I would have for him is that because it's a provincial sport, if you still have 16 teams making the playoffs, it doesn't matter who they're going to play in the early rounds. The hometown teams are going to watch these games no matter what. And I just don't understand when you have a league where the regular season essentially determines who the top teams of the league are, and then you pair them up in brackets where you have 2 of the top 3 teams in the Western Conference being out after 2 rounds. It's nonsensical. There's no other professional league that does it this way. But this has been Gary's thing, and the owners haven't been able to make him change. The GMs and their suggestions haven't been able to make him change. And really, I think the only time this will change is when he eventually retires. But if anything is going to get him his attention, I think it should be right now, because this has not been a competitive postseason. It has not been a compelling postseason. And and we're seeing, a sweep in the Western Conference Final and likely a 5-game end of the season in the Eastern Final. It should not be that way.
Let's talk about the decision to switch to John Tortorella for Las Vegas. It was March 29th, Michael. I mean, at that stage, Vegas is either the 7th or the 8th seed in the West. They're not even totally sure they're going to make the playoffs at that point. He replaces Bruce Cassidy. It was a very bold move that late in the season. And since then, Vegas has played 25 games and they've lost 4 of them. I mean, obviously a brilliant move for an established Jack Adams award-winning coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And, getting rid of a coach that was there behind the bench when they won their Stanley Cup. Look, Kelly McCrimmon, George McPhee, Bill Foley, they are all about winning. And at the end, I think they felt like Bruce Cassidy, who has a history of wearing out his welcome in certain places. I think that they felt his message was getting stale. I think if you look at all the analytics, it just came down to the fact that they weren't getting goaltending. But that's the way that they looked at it, and clearly it has worked. And I don't think that, John Tortorella could have sat on the sidelines. He was getting paid by the Philadelphia Flyers. He had not even a full month left on his contract there. He didn't get a raise from the Golden Knights to get there. He just wound up taking, Golden Knights assumed the rest of his contract. Now he does get playoff bonuses and things like that, so he's making some extra money here.
Sure.
But this guy came out of retirement after really professionally flaming out in Philadelphia. I mean, he essentially, forced his own firing. Like, they were going to let this ride out for the final 3 weeks of last season, the Philadelphia Flyers. And then after a game in Toronto where they lost 7-2, he came out and there was an altercation in the locker room with Cam York, reportedly. And then he came out afterwards and said, I'm not equipped to coach essentially a rebuilding team. But the one thing that he has always maintained when he was working on ESPN and when he was talking to NHL.com and even Joe Smith my colleague at The Athletic, a week before he was hired in Vegas, is that he didn't intend to that be the context of his quotes. He still had fire in his belly and wanted to continue to coach and wasn't, quote unquote, retired. And what do you know? A week later, he's behind their bench, and he's brought structure. And I think he's built for a more veteran team like this, a team with a history of winning, a team that knows how to win. And I think they just needed somebody to sort of guide the ship back on track. And he's done a tremendous job. But Mitch Marner's been tremendous there. Their blue line has been outstanding there. Eichel's been incredible there. And the thing that's changed the most is that Carter Hart, who was his goalie for a time in Philadelphia, has suddenly started stopping pucks, and he's been really, really good in the playoffs.
Yeah, you alluded to this earlier. It's not just that John Tortorella was hired, but also Carter Hart came back. He missed all of January, all of February, all of March, comes back in April, nukes Adin Hill into the center of the earth. We don't even know where that guy is anymore. And since April 9th, it's been all Carter Hart starts, and that's been huge. And, we all know half the battle in hockey playoffs is getting a hot goaltender, and Carter Hart was the better goaltender anyway. And clearly, obviously, goes without saying, he's played extremely well. So I think Carter Hart's a huge part of the story too.
Yeah, he's been the best goaltender in the playoffs, and during the regular season, Adin Hill, and even him when he obviously came back off his suspension essentially to start the season after they signed him late and all that stuff that we don't have to rehash when he was out of the league for a couple of years. He wasn't very good. And I think I could be totally making this up because I actually covered a couple Vegas games that didn't include the Wild, but I believe the Wild went there one game and chased him from the net. But I could be making this up. It could have been another game I was at where he got chased. But regardless, it just feels like he is just I think he feels very, very comfortable behind this system that John deploys. The one thing about a John Tortorella system is he demands, doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a superstar like an Eichel or a Marner, or whether it's one of his third or fourth liners, he demands packing it in, blocking shots, and limiting chances. And again, that's what the Wild did in Game 3, but they weren't able to do it consistently throughout the series against Colorado. Vegas has been, and Vegas has just run through the playoffs this way. They've been incredibly good defensively, and because of that, it makes it a lot easier on your goaltenders because you're not facing the plenty of chances that other goalies are. Now, I'm not again trying to take anything away from Carter because he's been really, really good. Has made a number of incredible saves, especially against really, really high-end players against Utah and against Anaheim and Colorado. But I think a lot of it has to do with the structure in front of them. I think that John just got this team back on track.
The Mitch Marner acquisition from Toronto was absolutely pivotal. He's got 21 points. These have been a relatively short series. He's got 21 points right now, which is pretty crazy. And Speaking of Toronto, by the way, are they going to lose Austin Matthews in the offseason? Are they going to lose Marner and Matthews in the span of 6 months? Is that something that's happening?
Look, it's going to be up to Austin. Reportedly they had a Zoom last week. John Chaika, the new GM, and Matt Sundin, obviously the legendary former player that's now in the hockey ops there, with Austin Matthews, and apparently everything was amicable and all that stuff. I think the common belief out there is that Austin's essentially going to give them another year. To show that they are putting together a program that could win. Let's see who the coach is, all that type of stuff. It also aligns him to when, he has the same agent as Connor McDavid's agent, and Connor's got 2 years left on his deal. So it aligns everything perfectly with Connor, which a lot of people are sort of theorizing. But the one thing I will say is that I think Austin Matthews, who's really close with Mitch Marner, and I think anybody in that Toronto bubble, is going to start looking at Mitch Marner as like, I wonder if this can be done. Get out of the bubble, go to a place where you've got a lot of less eyeballs on you, and all of a sudden the pressure comes down, and now you can start performing. And I think a lot of people think that. So, I don't know if Austin's going to force a trade now. That would mean the only way that John Chaika in his first move with the Toronto Maple Leafs is going to trade Austin Matthews is if Austin Matthews essentially pulls a Quinn Hughes and says, all right, time, get me out of here. And not that Quinn necessarily did that, but he certainly made it very, very clear to the Vancouver Canucks that he was not going to resign there in 2 years. So they got ahead of the game and obviously made a great trade with Minnesota where they got a haul back as well. And I do think that a lot of teams are going to start to look at that as the template. It used to be this belief in hockey that if you were a free agent, you were really a free agent the year before, because that's when you would know, obviously, if you were going to, you would go to that person and see if they would extend, and if not, then you'd start to move them. I think Quinn's given the template to everybody now. I think to Brady Tkachuk, to other players, and to teams as well, is that you go to them a couple years ahead, find out if they have any interest in re-signing, and if not, maybe you get the haul way in advance. And so I don't think it's going to happen now with Austin, but I do think Mitch Marner is going to suddenly be sort of a template for everybody to look at and be like, I could get out of Ottawa, I can get out of Vancouver, I can get, it's kind of an interesting little thing here that Austin sees that Marner might be 4 wins here, or is 4 wins from potential cup.
That could be the template, and that could ultimately help the Wild potentially here. How good is Vegas, right? So you mentioned Marner, Mark Stone's great. They've got Carter Hart has been very good in goal. They're going to be one of the last 2 teams standing. How good is Las Vegas based on the team that we've now seen in the playoffs? So we throw away the preconceived notions that we had through the regular season. How good are they? Are they one of the 2 best teams left?
Yeah, no, they have been outstanding, and they're coming together at the perfect time. As you mentioned, they're 19-4-1 since Tortorella took over. Marner and Eichel have been elite. They're getting great goaltending. They're getting great blue line, and they're absolutely completely healthy right now. And they're getting some time off, so a guy like Stone that just came back in the lineup can get some extra time. I think it'll be fascinating if Carolina closes at Montreal, what this next series is going to look like. First of all, they're going to move up the series. It'll start June 2nd as opposed to June 4th. So that'll get things going right away. So Vegas will have a chance not to get stale. But Carolina almost seems like a complete template, a complete copycat of Vegas. And that's why it's going to be a fascinating series. I'll be really curious to see if this is a boring series or one that is kind of high energy, heavy hits and actually leads to goals, because they play very defensive style. I mean, the one thing about Carolina is they're so disciplined to Rod Brind'Amour's style. They don't stray. Like last night, that Montreal game, that was as tactical a win as I've seen Carolina play throughout the postseason, and they've run through the East as well. And so I think that this Carolina-Vegas, it's going to be interesting, like in the war of attrition of who's just better defensively on 2 teams that don't seem to stray from structure at all. And, it could make for some really low-scoring games that might not be the most sexy to watch, or it could lead to some really just some ruthless, type of hockey, with 2 teams that are just incredibly disciplined in the way that they play the game. And, so it'll be fascinating, but I think Vegas is a really good team. I think this is Carolina's opportunity to finally win a cup in this type of era. They've obviously, they won in 2006, but the last several years they've been tremendous hockey teams, yet they keep on running into Florida essentially in the conference final. And now that Florida's out, Tampa's out, Toronto's out, Buffalo's out, all these teams are out, that used to give them fits at times, not Buffalo, but those other teams. I think that they have seen their window open right from the start of this postseason with Florida, especially not being in it, and then Tampa bowing out the way that they did to Montreal. So this is going to be a really fascinating time because I think Carolina realizes that if they don't win it now, they're never going to win it. So this is going to be a heck of a series if it's Carolina and Vegas.
All right, just a couple of last things on Colorado, if you don't mind, Michael. Let's go to Game 3. We're rolling into the second period. It's 3-0 Colorado. In that moment, did you think that Colorado was going to step on the gas, turn it into a 7-game grinder, and ultimately win at home, and the cream would rise to the top? In that moment, Game 3, 3-0, top of the heading into the second period.
Well, it's funny because to me it looked too similar to the Game 4 of the Wild series where the Wild melted down. And this is going to sound like I joked with Gorg the other day. This is almost like a Kevin Gorg preposterous statement. But it's like when the Wild got up 3-0 that early, I remember going on with Tom Reed between periods and saying there is a lot of game left. Like it almost happened too soon. And it really felt the same way there. It's like they take a 3-0 lead going into period 2. And when Mark Stone scored bright and early of that second period, I was like, I remember saying to a friend of mine, I'm like, they're going to blow this game because it just felt like now you just gave a ton of time and only a 2-goal lead for Vegas to climb back from. So I really did. I honestly felt like Vegas was going to win that game the second that Mark Stone scored. So I really felt that the way that game looked was so much like the Wild game where they blew the 3-0 lead to Colorado that I really never felt like they were going to actually rally back. And it's funny because I was covering games 5 through 7 of the Western Conference Final. Turned out to be the easiest series I've ever covered. But I started canceling hotels in the third period of that Game 4 because I just knew the next morning I was not getting on a plane to go to Denver. So I really never felt that Colorado was in that. And then you knew the context that the car was clearly playing hurt, couldn't handle a puck. McKinnon wasn't skating well. You just knew that they were cooked and that they were not going to be able to extend the series. And even if they somehow got to Game 5, that they were just too banged up. And look, I know that fans, especially when, you just look at it in your own insular team, they don't want to hear excuses. Wild fans don't want to hear about Eriksson and Brodin. They just want you to go out and win. And I understand that. But look, they're not excuses sometimes. They're real. And if you're the Colorado Avalanche and you have Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon or Terry Lehkonen and clearly Sam Malinsky was hurt and Nichushkin wasn't even playing, like that's just too much. There's no team that can come back from that type of stuff. And sometimes it's excuses, but sometimes it's reality. And I just didn't think that the way those teams lined up with as Vegas as healthy as they were, that Colorado was going to be able to recover.
Yeah, it's I did think that Colorado was going to turn it on at that point. I'm like, Colorado's going to go win this game. They're going to win the next one. They're going to flip the series back to home ice, and Colorado's going to win. And I'm glad I am not in a state that allowed betting on the series, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I'd have been wrong there. Michael, thank you. This has been great. I've really enjoyed catching up with you again, and it's been a fascinating turn of events. Nobody saw the sweep coming. I gotta believe, I don't know the betting odds, but I gotta believe pre-series, the betting odds for Vegas to win in 4 had to be, 20-1, something like that. Do you happen to know what the betting odds were?
No, I don't. I mean, that's one thing I try to stay away from is that. But I mean, there's no way like to Vegas. I mean, I would think the odds would be much greater for Vegas to win in a sweep over Colorado. I think you probably could have made an absolute fortune. You could throw a buck on it and probably make 1,000. Like it would have been something that I can't imagine it was low odds. Let's put it that way.
No, I think you're right. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate it, my friend.
Yep. See you, Charge.
Thanks. Michael Russo, The Athletic, theathletic.com. Plenty more to get to over the course of this show. We've got a new event coming to the next Summer Olympics. And it's, as far as I know, the first time a licensed IP is going to be making it to the Olympics. We'll talk about Ninja Warrior coming to the 2028 Olympics when we come back.
It's Charge on the Fan.
From the 1-800 Ask Gary Traffic Center.
This report is sponsored.
If you want to chime in what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows, like we used earlier in the show to talk about SNL performers, cast members, you can make your voice heard on that Brad John Bryant KFAN text line. Just let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That's 64686. Standard text message and data rate supply.
Kevin Gorg chiming in. He believes that pre-Vegas Colorado series, the Vegas sweep would have paid 30 to 1.
I buy that. I buy that for sure.
At the time, it seemed very unlikely, but man, 30 to 1. The way you could have seen it coming, and there wouldn't have been great opportunity to see it coming, but if you'd have played the injury angle, and looked at it that way, maybe that would have been something. But, we're talking about a Vegas team that won 39 games. That's it. I believe they've got the lowest point total of any team to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals since they've gone to this format. So, yeah, it would have been tough to see. But 30 to 1, that'd have been juicy. Mentioned this last segment. The Olympics always they've added a lot of new sports over our lifetimes in the Olympics. It used to be track and field. Now it's a lot of other stuff. The new addition to the Olympics is Ninja Warrior obstacle racing. Yep, the TV show Ninja Warrior has now got a licensing agreement with the Olympics to bring actual Ninja Warrior branded obstacle racing to the Olympics. And they're going to they're taking and I grant them, I think it's better if you're going to add something, you should remove something as far as I'm concerned, because there's already too many events in the Olympics. They're removing the pentathlon. Now, Brett Blakemore, can you tell me any of the 5 sports in the pentathlon?
That was not the breakdancing bit from the last Summer Olympics, right? That wasn't in the pentathlon.
It is not the breakdancing. That's gone too, though, I believe.
Thank God.
I think they've killed that off.
Yeah. Yes. See you later. I got no interest in that. I couldn't. It's not like when I think of, athons, I'm thinking of like the swimming and the running and the, I don't think that's what the pentathlon is, unless if I'm completely wrong.
Actually, you're pretty right.
Okay.
So the original pentathlon, we're going to go down the pentathlon rabbit hole for just a minute. Obviously, pent
5
means 5, pentagon, right? It means 5. So it's 5 sports. In the old Olympics, in ye olden days Olympics in Greece, the 5 were the long jump, the javelin, which is still one of the all-time cool track and field events, discus, a short foot race, and then wrestling. So that was back then. That was considered the hallmarks of an athlete's military fitness. So it was sort of like these were the great military athletes that did these original ancient Olympics. And actually, Jim Thorpe won the gold in 1912 with those sports in that version of the pentathlon. But then it changed in the 1920s. The pentathlon changed to something I think even more badass now with the 5 events. Well, now it's all going to be removed to make room for Ninja Warrior. But the 5 events since the 1920s to today for 100 years has been epi fencing. So fencing with the super thin little, it's an epi, sword. Pistol shooting, swimming, show jumping, an equestrian event on the back of an unfamiliar horse. They give you a horse you've never been with before, and you have to do show jumping on an unfamiliar horse and a 3,000-meter cross-country run. It used to be 4,000 meters. They made it easier for whatever reason 20 years ago. 3,000-meter cross-country run. That's a pretty badass setup. Fencing, pistol shooting, swimming, show jumping, and the 3,000-meter cross-country run. There is a women's version of the pentathlon as well. It's also going away. It started in 1964. There's a little history lesson on the pentathlon. They don't do all the same stuff. They don't do the shooting. They don't do the epi fencing. They do 80-meter hurdles, a shot put, a high jump, a long jump, and a 200-meter race. What they could have done to make the pentathlon way cooler was you had to do them all in a row. You had to go do one, then go do the other. Go run a 3,000-meter race, then go fence somebody, sword play, then jump on a horse for the equestrian event, then go jump in the pool for the swimming race, and then go do some shooting. That would have been way cooler. Like the biathlon. The biathlon in the Winter Olympics is one of the great sports because you're doing these disparate things, but they all run one to the other. They're very fluid that way. That would have made the pentathlon way cooler. You might be wondering, is there a Wayne Gretzky of the pentathlon? Is there somebody who is so good at the pentathlon that everybody's been trying to be that guy? And the answer is yes. It's a Hungarian named András Galsko. He is the only modern pentathlete to win 3 Olympic individual gold medals. He won them spanning 12 years, 1960, 68, and 72. He also won 2 Olympic silvers, so he's got 5 Olympic medals in the pentathlon. He's got 10 world championships in the pentathlon. Now, they're going to do away with the pentathlon, as I mentioned, to make room for Ninja Warrior. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But I do feel a bit bad. You're a pentathlete. You've been training your whole life knowing that your end goal as a pentathlete was to be in the Olympics. You've been getting up since you were a kid, taking epi fencing lessons at 6 a.m. And then you do your equestrian training at 7 a.m. And then you get in a quick 5-mile run and then you go off to school. And you've been doing your whole life as a pentathlete. And then the Olympics goes, you know what? Ninja Warrior. We're gonna replace your whole sport with Ninja Warrior obstacle courses. And Brett, when we come back, you and I can have a healthy debate about Ninja Warrior. Started 30 years ago. Incredibly successful. It's gone to the U.S. It's gone out. Many countries have got versions of Ninja Warrior. And now it'll be an Olympic sport. When we return, we'll talk about Ninja Warrior entering the Olympics, whether it makes sense or not, and some parallels to some other opportunities as well. When we come back, Paul Charchian in for PA, an advanced Thursday edition of the Friday Football Feast.
You're listening to Paul Charchian in for PA on the Fan.
July 31st, Joe Bonamassa August 15th, and Snoop Dogg September 5th. Get complete details on all of our upcoming shows on the concert page, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Welcome back. Paul Charchian with UPA. Nordor are out. Brett Blakenmore helping me out today. Appreciate your efforts. Brett, now, I received a tweet over the break that I could be mistaken. I don't know for sure. Maybe I misunderstood this. The pentathlon may be not going away entirely as an event. It's just that they're replacing the equestrian element of it. So one of the 5 parts of the pentathlon with the Ninja Warrior obstacle racing. Now, Brett, you're everybody that's listening right now. We've all watched Ninja Warrior, either intentionally or unintentionally. It's been on the background of, you're at Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever, or you've actually looked for Ninja Warrior. What is your feeling about the 30-year-old show that started in Japan?
Well, I love the the concept of the actual competition is fun to watch. It's also fun to do the Monday morning quarterback of how do they possibly not get that salmon ladder as you're eating in your Barca lounger, having chips.
Right.
My thing with at least the American version that I am not a fan of is that they almost originated sob story television, and it drives me
What do you mean?
bananas. So this is, back in the day when you used to watch, back in my day, when you used to watch Survivor or something, they were just normal Joe Schmoes that went on the show because they wanted to win money. Well, American Ninja Warrior really started the sob story TV. So you have to spend 5 minutes on a package of them. My entire town was burnt down, and also a tornado came through, and also, so I'm doing this for everyone in my town, and also my school was blown up in a mining accident, and I was raised with one eye and 3 fingers, and so then for 5 minutes, you just feel, oh, how terrible for this guy, and then what happens? 2 seconds later, whoa, oh, there he goes. Okay, well, moving on to the next guy. It becomes like it's not even about the competition itself. It's just about. So now you watch anything. You watch The Voice. You watch. I'm really obsessed with this show on Netflix called $1 Million Secret. It's fantastic. I highly recommend that.
What is that? What's $1 Million Secret?
It's a competition show. So it's these people are in a mansion. They all have these boxes, and one of them has $1 million in it. And you try to deduce who has the $1 million. The millionaire has these little things tasks they have to do. So stick 2 clothespins onto people or sneak this into a conversation. And then if they do that, they get rewards. But if people catch them, then they vote them out. So at the end, if you survive all that, you get $1 million. So it's very good. I explained it very quickly, but very, very good show. But even on that show, you get people, and not to say that, people with sob stories shouldn't be highlighted, but it's like, I feel like every single show is just about how horrible everything is. And, it's just, I'm over. And I blame American Ninja Warrior for starting that trend. Does that make any sense?
They want you to build up. So they want to give you an emotional attachment to these athletes, right? So that somebody doesn't show up to go run the Ninja Warrior course that you don't have any investment in, because then you don't care as much whether or not they make it. You want to have people that that you have some attachment to, which totally makes sense. And I can see where the show would have changed that way over 30 years. And the show is 30 years old. If you go back to the Japanese version of it, by the way, it is not called Ninja Warrior in Japan. It is called Sasuke, which does not mean Ninja Warrior, by the way. Totally different name. It came to America and they wanted to give it a name that meant something. Sasuke doesn't mean anything. And so they ultimately chose Ninja Warrior for when the replays came here to America. By the way, no ninjas on Ninja Warrior. I think it'd be cooler if there was actual ninjas on the show. You never see competitors throwing shurikens at each other and doing the nunchucks and everything. That would have been that'd be a really good
at least
show.
Wear the outfit. That's the least you can.
Well, yeah, exactly. Wear the ninja outfit to do the obstacle course. So of course, Ninja Warrior's got the brutally ingenious and difficult obstacle courses. Contestants try to get as far as they can through the obstacle course as fast as possible. There's a time limit in which they need to get through it. 3 minutes, something like that. And even though the contestants are usually incredibly athletic, and by the way, it's never the big built out guys that do well. It's always, and women do it as well. It's always like the thin, lean, strong people that seem to do well in Ninja Warrior, from what I can tell. So Ninja Warrior starts in Japan, comes to the U.S. It was airing on a cable channel that was around then, isn't now, called G4. I vaguely remember G4. It gained a lot of traction in the U.S. Reminded me, have you ever heard of Iron Chef, Brett?
I have. I've never watched it, but I know what it is. Yeah. I think I remember G4 was
Iron Chef.
It was similar to like Spike, right? Remember Spike?
Yeah. It was Guy TV, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think it had I think it had a video game show on G4 at one point that was all about, today, the news of today's video games, stuff like that. I think on G4. Iron Chef at the same time as of Ninja Warrior was that was a Japanese cooking competition before the U.S. market really had cooking competitions. Now the Food Network's all cooking competitions, but Iron Chef was doing it first, and there were the original Japanese broadcasts, and they would periodically show up on Food Network, and Iron Chef was fascinating because it was Japanese. You had the premise of the show was every show there would be a surprise main ingredient that the 4 chefs would have to work into every serving. So they made an appetizer, they made a side dish, an entree, and they made a dessert, and they all would have to have this main ingredient. But because Iron Chef's a Japanese show, the food choices were borderline horrifying, which was part of the fun of it. Like today, Morimoto-san is going to use the spine bones of the eel to add crunch to his mango tart. And that was part of the fun of it. They were trying to make dessert out of some, eyeballs and stuff like that the Japanese eat and we would never touch. So the show Iron Chef finds its way to the Food Network, explodes in popularity. This is the late 90s, and I was recording the episodes back then. And then it did so well. The Japanese versions did so well. That created Iron Chef America, just like Ninja Warrior jumped over to America. Morimoto in particular made the jump across the Pacific and became a massive celebrity chef. And he was on Iron Chef America with Bobby Flay, and those two, that turned into a big rivalry. Bobby Flay was already pretty well known here, but that turned both him and Morimoto into huge names. And Morimoto would frequently just get mortified by Bobby Flay because Morimoto is grounded in the sacrosanct nature of the kitchen. And then Bobby Flay would he'd win an episode of Iron Chef America and go stand on his countertop, on his cooking surface and his food prep surface. And Morimoto's like, you can't put your shoes on the surface. He's horrified, but Bobby Flay didn't anyway. I wouldn't be surprised. Iron Chef could be in the Olympics at some point before long. Anyway, but back to Ninja Warrior. Ninja Warrior starts, as I mentioned, it successfully makes its way here. They've had the same co-host for a long time, or co-host on the show, the former NFL player, Akbar Baza, oh boy, here we go. Baza Biamile. It's been a long time. Now you're a Packer guy.
Good enough for me. Yeah.
You remember KGB.
Of course.
KGB, right? His brother.
Who could forget?
The beer. Baja Biamila, right? So, his brother has been the co-host of American Ninja Warrior for 18 years, and now it's going to be in the Olympics. The mostly scandal-free Ninja Warrior. They did have a winner, a season 11 winner, who was later arrested for serious sexual misconduct, and they had to edit out all his participation entirely out of reruns of the show, even though he ended up being the winner. And I'm not positive how you edit out the ultimate champion from your entire season, but apparently they've managed to do that. They say the American version is far too easy. Lots of people finish the course in the American version in Ninja Warrior, and they do not very often in the Japanese version. So apparently we've gotten it softer, but it is now going to be in the Olympics in 2028. Brett, as a Ninja Warrior hater, how do you feel about it creeping into the Olympics?
Well, hang on. So I got this text from Carl in Minneapolis, and I want to just rectify, the record here. So he says, hey, Blakemore, there are Ninja Warrior gyms all across the U.S. now. It's completely a sport now, independent of the show. They have regular tourneys all the time. They are incredible athletes. It's a great fit for the Olympics because it checks all the sports boxes: strength, agility, skill, stamina, and no aesthetic scores. I agree with all of that. And at no point was I ripping the athletes taking part in said competition. At no point was I doing that. I was saying...
I thought you did.
No. I was saying the producers of the TV show have caused irreparable damage. That's not the word. You know what I'm saying. The damage to American television. And other people agree with me, by the way. Here's a text, 715 guy. America's Got Talent is the biggest culprit of sob story TV. They're terrible as well. You spend, 10 minutes talking about, how their entire town was haunted by ghosts, and then, they bomb within 2 seconds and they get the red X's. Someone says American Idol was the originator of sob story TV. Probably true as well. But
I think it definitely had that form. It had that formula as well, for sure.
Yeah, you know what you never hear, Church, and we'll get back to the actual topic. You never hear someone go on American Ninja Warrior like, yeah, my mom and dad were great, and I had a good upbringing, and lived in a quaint little neighborhood, and I just decided to do American Ninja Warrior, so here I am. Never once would you hear that on the show.
No.
It doesn't exist.
You never get that. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's always a flood or a tornado.
Yeah,
there's always something like that, and we want them to recover from that.
Yeah. But the athletes themselves,
when we come back,
it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch in the Olympics, and I look forward.
You got to be a great athlete,
100%.
It's really, really hard to get through the Ninja Warrior course. Really, really hard. You have to be a great athlete, and probably a far better athlete than a lot of the athletes that we talk about all the time on this station to get through the American Ninja Warrior. Brutally tough. Brett, when we come back, do the Vikings have a quarterback controversy? We'll talk about Kyler Murray, J.J. McCarthy, and whether or not Kyler Murray should be viewed as the starter and afforded all the opportunities that come with being the starter, or is this an open competition? We're starting to get our first look at Kyler Murray in a Vikings uniform. We'll talk through that when we come back to the Fan.